Welcome again to this Ask an Expert series. We're so glad you're here with us today. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Abby Horswell, and I provide contractor support to the Office for Victims of Crime Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. We are so excited to have you with us this afternoon for the Ask an Expert discussion. This series convenes skilled practitioners with registered participants to discuss topics related to human trafficking. The Ask an Expert series is sponsored by the Office for Victims of Crime Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. Please continue to use the chat feature to communicate with me, the moderator, our panel of experts, and all participants throughout the session today. Live captioning is available. To enable it, select closed caption on the bottom of your screen. You will see the live captioning after selecting closed caption. Our format today is a panel discussion followed by an open Q&A. You may submit a question at any time during the session by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Following the webinar, we will email you handouts and a Q&A document with all of the information covered in today's session. Before I turn it over to our speakers, please take a moment to respond to our poll, which will be launched on your screen shortly. Now, I am pleased to turn the time over to Bill Wolf, Senior Advisor for Victim Services and Human Trafficking Program Director with the Office for Victims of Crime.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you to all of you for joining us today, and thank you to the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center for organizing this. I can tell you, I'm just so thankful for all the amazing work that the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center is doing to support the field and getting them able to access our funding and tools and resources. I'm particularly excited for this session of Ask an Expert because the question of applying for federal grants, especially doing it for the first time, is one that we get so often at OVC. And while applying for a federal grant may seem a bit overwhelming, I'm confident that our panel of experts help you all divide the steps into manageable actions, offering insight and answering your questions. The Office for Victims of Crime is the largest federal funder of services for human trafficking victims. We award nearly $100 million in grant money available to organizations, tribes, law enforcement across this country. And your organizations are doing amazing work across the country, and we want to continue to support you in serving victims of human trafficking. But we need you to apply for the funding so that we can get you the tools and resources that you need. And we hope that today's webinar, any questions you have about the application process, and that our panelists will be able to share some of their tips on drafting a compelling application, avoiding common errors, finding funding solicitation, how to apply online and post-award requirements. And I'll tell you, the one tip that I'll offer you today that I offer all of the folks that I talk to is give yourself plenty of time. This is not something that you want to rush. We are the federal government. We will make it as difficult as possible. I'm really, again, thankful for the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center to bring together these experts to help you all break. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to today's moderator, Rossiter. Constance is a skilled collaborator with more than 13 years of experience in the anti-trafficking field. She previously served as the program director of the Trafficked Persons Assistance Program at YMCA International Services in Houston, where she secured both government and community foundation grants to support a comprehensive trauma-informed service delivery model for victims of human trafficking. Constance is also a member of the Field Advisory Committee for Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. Constance, over to you.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here today and a part of Ask an Expert series. I look forward to the session on writing your first federal grant. So let's get started. Today we have three panelists joining us. They are Susan Williams, Sarah Olson, and Lauren Arnold. I'm so sorry. I just lost, my apologies, I just lost the screen. So first, let me start with Sarah. Susan. Susan is a nationally recognized victim services specialist, and during her 24 years working with the United States National Department of Justice, please excuse me, I have just lost my screen and I'm a little bit out of sorts right now. So I'm trying to get that back up for you. So she spends, during her 24 years with the United States Department of Justice, Susan served as a Deputy Director in the Office for Victims of Crime, OVC, enhancing the country's response to all forms of crime victimization. And she was also overseeing the OVC's human trafficking programs. She also served as an Associate Director in the Office on Violence Against Women. Welcome, Susan. So next we have is Sarah. Sarah has spent over 14 years developing and implementing victim-focused programs. She currently works as the Director of Victim Resources for the National Center for Victims of Crime. Previously, she served at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where she worked on over 24,000 cases of alleged child sexual exploitation. At the Multnomah County, Oregon's Department of Community Justice Victim Services Unit, Sarah oversaw the service programs, including the jurisdiction's sex trafficking task force. Welcome, Sarah. Lauren is the program manager for the Salvation Army, Delaware's anti-human trafficking program, Restoration Now. This new program provides emergency shelter and trauma-informed intensive case management to adult victims of both sex and labor trafficking. The Salvation Army of Delaware was also awarded its first Office for Victims of Crime Human Trafficking grant this year. Susan, Sarah, and Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. While the federal grant application process can seem very overwhelming, our panelists today will divide the steps into very manageable actions for you and offering the insight and also answering your questions. We will talk today about, the panel will talk today about how to write a compelling application. And could you just excuse me just a little bit? I'm really sorry about this. Avoiding common errors, finding funding solicitations, applying online, and also fulfilling post-award requirements. So no matter, for everybody on the video, no matter what your experience is with grant writing, we hope that this discussion will help you to better prepare to find and apply for federal funding opportunities. So as a reminder for the audience, please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen while participants begin submitting their questions. I'd like to ask our panelists as we get started a few questions. Lauren, let's start with you. Since you have just went through this process with your organization recently, what is the process for applying for a federal grant?
Thank you, Constance. I'm going to focus my remarks on the pre-application phase, so what your organization can do now before the funding solicitations come out. So first, does your organization have a business or program plan? A program plan can include who you're serving, the resources you already have, and a budget for each item you want to accomplish to get that federal funding. Second, what official MOUs do you have with partner organizations? Identifying gaps in services now and establishing formal partnership agreements are very important in the grant application process. The center actually has a sample MOU and a sample sub-agreement on their website with language to get you started in creating your own. Lastly, you ask yourself, if we get this grant, how can our organization sustain the work? Should the money be spent to hire staff or carry out the mission, or is it really just mostly on the services themselves that you need that money for?
Thank you so much, Lauren. Susan, Sarah, would you talk about the process of submitting a grant application?
Absolutely. First, I would like to mention that just like Lauren said, having a strong program plan and a vision for how you're going to start, grow, or sustain your work really helps when you start writing the grant. So I'm going to specifically talk about the writing process and why it's more than just writing. If you have 6 weeks to write the grant, the first week you need to do 3 things. One, you need to make sure that you want it. Grants take a lot of work to write, but they take even more work to execute. So you want to make sure that this particular grant is right for your program and organization. The second thing you want to do is develop a grant writing team. Many organizations underestimate the time it takes to write a successful grant, and they think that they can hire a grant writer and that they'll do all the heavy lifting. But taking the grant from identification to submission takes a team, and subject matter experts and decision makers need to be part of that process the entire time to make sure that their vision is really clearly presented. If the grant is the grant writer's job at that point to make sure that that vision is being put together in a way that follows the rules of the RFP. And then finally, you want to develop a clear vision for the fund and know that you can actually pay for what you are trying to do with what the budget is. The next phase is the writing, and it can usually take 3 or 4 weeks. And this isn't just writing, and it's not a passive stage in the process for the non-writing team members. So in addition to writing, you have to gather attachments, certifications, develop those partnerships that Lauren was talking about. You want to negotiate, obviously reviewing budgets, and of course, also reviewing the drafts as whoever's writing the grant is creating that. And it's a good idea to have regular check-ins during this phase with everybody on the grant team. And then the final week, one of the most important things you need to do is read the final draft. It's important for all decision makers and subject matter experts to know the commitments that they're agreeing to and what's being submitted. And it may sound silly, but given the time crunch, many people assume that the final draft's okay. When you're ready to upload, try not to wait until the last minute. There's always technical difficulties. And after that, you get to just wait.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Susan, you are next. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when you are awarded a federal grant and what can an organization expect?
Yes, I'm happy to. And I think as Sarah alluded, there is a bit of a time lag between when applications are due and when awards are announced. The application review and decision-making process is very comprehensive, and it usually takes anywhere between 3 to 6 months before the application or between the application due date and when awards are announced. Now, typically, awards are announced on a rolling basis throughout the final few months of the federal fiscal year, which runs from October through September. And successful applicants will receive notice electronically that their organization has been selected as an award recipient. Now, I want to make a note here that the process for applying for OVC's Human Trafficking Program funding is competitive. In the past, first-time applicants have been successful, but it's also common for new applicants not to receive a grant award on their first attempt. If this happens to your organization, I encourage you not to give up and to apply again when the next opportunity does come up. Ultimately, all unfunded applicants will receive a letter notifying them of the funding decision and will receive a copy of the peer review comments on their application. These comments can be highly beneficial to informing the development of applications in future funding cycles. And I can assure you that OVC highly encourages those applicants who did apply previously and did not receive funding to come back and apply again. So now, if awarded, the grant recipient will have 45 days from the date of the award to formally accept it, including the acceptance of all award terms and conditions. And when I talk about award conditions, this is the list of legal, programmatic, and financial terms and conditions that are included as part of an award document. I'm sorry. Now, it's common for an OVC grant award to include one or more conditions that must be addressed prior to the release of funding. And in these cases, project implementation does not begin on the award date, but rather once the special conditions are signed off. Now, for all new grantees, they will be assigned a program manager, a staff person who works in OVC who will serve as their primary point of contact during the life of the grant. The program manager provides guidance on grant management and program implementation and is responsible for the monitoring and oversight of the award. And finally, all OVC human trafficking grantees are given access to a wide range of training, technical assistance, and capacity building opportunities to support them in their work.
Well, thank you, Susan. Just a quick reminder for the audience, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And moving forward, Susan, I think we'll just stick with you and ask you another question. So the question is, how would an organization know that they are ready to actually apply for the federal grant?
Yes, thanks, Constance. Wonderful question. I would say what I would consider is whether your organization has a financial system in place to adequately manage, track, and report on the use of federal funding. The Department of Justice Financial Guide provides a detailed description of the pre-award requirements for the standards for financial systems and offers a very useful guide for identifying what an adequate accounting system entails. So I highly encourage taking a look at that. I also encourage potential applicants, and particularly those who have applied, or actually those who may have applied in the past but have never actually received federal funding, to take a little bit of time to become familiar with several key post-award requirements. These include requirements around general award special conditions, federal match requirements where applicable, and grant reporting. Now, the center's website has some excellent documents on meeting a federal match requirement in their resource library. Another wonderful resource is OJP's Funding Resource Center, which offers a comprehensive source that captures helpful guidance, information, and resources for potential OJP and OVC funding applicants, as well as access to post-award instructions and resources. This information, too, is very useful to review even prior to the release of the solicitation to gain a fuller understanding of the expectations of grant recipients.
Well, thank you, Susan. Next, Lauren, I have Sarah. Sarah, what are your thoughts on how to know if you are ready to apply for the federal grant?
Well, as Susan mentioned, having the financial system in place and knowing post-award requirements is really helpful going into the application process. You also want to have a healthy program that is well documented, where you can articulate your vision and goals and objectives. This is also a good indicator of your readiness to apply for federal funding. Part of federal funding is also being able to collect data and use it to show how your program is successful as you report on the work you're doing. So if that sounds a little overwhelming, sometimes managing a grant would be overwhelming as well. Another indicator to show you're ready to pursue more funding is doing your work. You have ideas or many ideas to expand and enhance, which is what a lot of grants fund. So some examples could be you run a sex trafficking task force that focuses on minors and you want to expand to young adults, or you're a shelter and you want to add comprehensive services or partner with people who do it on site with you. Or currently you provide daytime services and now want to expand to 24/7 support. You want to make sure also that you have the staff capacity to dedicate yourself to, or to dedicate to the grant. You want to be realistic about how much work it will take to manage and build that into your budget. If you are over leveraging positions and expect them to take on additional responsibilities, you will feel taxed throughout the program. Writing reports, attending required training, and data collection all take time away from the work that you're already doing. And then finally, you want to make sure that you have your organization's support. You can't do this on your own. And so you need to ensure that your financial team is willing and able to do their part related to quarterly financials, reimbursement requests, and maintaining records. Each federal agency is different, but making sure you can hand their financial requirements before committing to grant writing is important.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Lauren, up to you. How did the Salvation Army of Delaware, how did they know that they were ready to apply for the grant?
Well, for us, and I think probably for other organizations as well, it was important, like I said before, to have a plan in place. We spent a lot of time with that plan for receiving the funds once we were going to get them. We had also established a history, even though it was short, of serving clients as proof that we were doing the work. So as Sarah mentioned, we could narrow it down as far as, hey, we want to expand our work. And then also we did our research to show that there was a need and explained how our organization was going to fill and meet that need. And again, as far as what Sarah was talking about, the team, I just want to accentuate this just because we've just been through it. It absolutely takes a team approach. I don't know how people do this alone. Our leadership and the administration at Salvation Army was really supportive of the application process and of us pursuing this federal funding, and it was very much needed. But we definitely, the most important thing was pulling that team together. I think you're muted, Constance.
Thank you. To the audience, please submit your questions. If any questions came up for you, please submit them in the Q&A chat box there. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to the next question. Lauren, what are the 3 tips for submitting a competitive grant application?
So first, I think you have to have the right language. We learned that early on. It's different from writing something for a private grant. So we also looked at other winning applications to know what was really, really needed in that application. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is, I'm going to echo what these guys have said: work more, work, and work more. You're going to have to really write a lot and continue to work at it. It's definitely not like a put it off to the last minute thing. Have at least 2 people that are working on it so that you can send it back and forth, send the application, review, edit, and share ideas. And then also I'd say set out to be the best program. I don't know that we are the best program, but we certainly are setting out to be the best program, to have evidence-based models to follow. And a big thing is to have the passion, I think, to follow that through. And also, I've also learned this through the process, not just passion, but a vision. So you've got to have both things, and you've got to be able to somehow communicate the passion, but also your capability to do that in that grant application.
Thank you. Sarah, could you just chime in here, please?
Sure. So my 3 tips would be to be interesting, to be consistent, and follow directions. By interesting, I mean a good grant tells a story, starting with the scope of a unique problem. Some of what Lauren had just said about having your own data and really developing the need, but you want to tell a story about you and your jurisdiction. And so you need to sometimes get creative with that data and use sources that you have accessible to you. And then you want to wow them with a well thought out plan that leverages everything you know from your previous work, what you've done, what your program's done, and how your program is going to meet survivors' needs, but also how it's going to be realistic and reasonable within sort of normal operation constraints. In terms of being consistent, you want to make sure that every piece, the grant has a number of little tiny pieces, and everything needs to be cohesive and reference each other. So goals, objectives, timelines, budgets, and logic models, these are all pieces of the same puzzle. And so you want that to be clear. And then finally, follow directions. RFP gives you really detailed directions, from font type to size and size to questions they want you to answer. Don't lose points because you tried to squeeze in extra words or went in out of order. The reviewers have a job to do, and so part of grant writing is making it easy for them to do it.
Well, thank you so much. Susan, you have reviewed a lot of grant applications in your career, during your career. Do you have anything to add to what Lauren and Sarah have just shared with us?
Certainly. Well, I think Lauren and Sarah have shared some really, really wonderful tips. And I know Bill touched on this in his opening remarks, but I would add and reiterate that there is a significant level of federal funding available to support human trafficking programs around the country. And just this year alone, the Office for Victims of Crime will be administering a number of different human trafficking grant programs touching on different areas of crime victim services. So my tip here is for organizations to determine which program solicitation is going to best fit their organizational needs, and then to present an application that is uniquely developed in response to that solicitation. I think that really makes a difference. And finally, and I think this is something that can never be said enough, just carefully review the application package in its entirety to ensure that you've got all the pieces. The application meets the basic minimum requirement. It includes and addresses all of the required elements of the solicitation, as well as including all the appropriate attachments. I think once you have done this and you've taken all the other steps that have been suggested before you, you will be ready to hit that submit button.
Okay, thank you so much. We've had a great start to this conversation, and now we are going to move on to the audience's questions. And we have about 25 minutes or so for our panelists to answer your questions writing your first federal grant. So let's get started.
Hi, Constance. We had one question come in through the chat. If all future questions could be put through the Q&A box from the participants so that the panelists have access to them, we would really appreciate that. But in the meantime, this question is, are there any specific trainings offered for each federal grant?
I was wondering, Susan, could you maybe field that question for the participant?
Certainly. It is common during the award cycle process, after a solicitation has been posted, there may be an orientation available. So potential applicants can actually participate and hear from the federal staff that are working on that program to cover the basics of the program itself, the criteria for the solicitation, what the application requirements are. So once solicitations are coming out, I would suggest one of the first things you're going to want to look for is, will there be an orientation that's specific to that program solicitation? And if so, sign up. Again, this can be very helpful when it comes to the specifics about a particular program solicitation.
Does anybody else have anything else to add to that? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question then.
Constance, we have a few more questions coming in from the chat, so we'll continue to go with those. One question is, where can we get a sample of a winning application? I think Lauren referenced this as something that was really helpful in applying for her first grant, but where and how can other organizations take a similar approach?
Yes, I think maybe let's pitch that to the whole panel. And can anybody maybe please add or answer this question?
I can just answer from my experience. Luckily, we're part of a larger organization who's willing to share. And, you know, although everyone's kind of going for OVC funding, we were able to look at pieces and parts of that so that we could kind of get a sense, because when you're if you're writing for your first time and looking at OVC, it was just all Greek to me at first. I had no idea what the real expectation was or the format and things like that. So I was able to look at different ones within the organization that were old, but they were, it was good to look at them for all of the format and the structure and the wording and things like that that were necessary. So that was within a large organization though. So I don't know if maybe Susan or Sarah could speak to other samples that they can acquire.
Anybody else on that? Okay, so Lauren, you just talked about formatting, and I have a question that's on the chat here. Is that how do you learn about the format for the grant? Anybody want to field that?
One of the reasons the RFP is so long is because they have all of these directions in there. So you're going to see it when you read through it. So normally when someone's looking at an RFP, they first are looking for eligibility. So you may not have seen that before, but we recommend you want to read every single word of that grant before you apply it. So you'll definitely see the instructions. If anything's unclear, there's also, for example, sometimes it's not clear about what the font size is for charts. There's always contact information, and you can ask questions about that and follow up.
Thank you. And just, Sarah, if we can stay with you, because I think this next question links to that. If we partnered, well, first of all, it asks, how do we know that we have answered all of the questions? And I think that's pretty much what you have just said, but did you want to just maybe just expand on that a little bit again?
Yeah, so each request for proposal or grant is a little bit different. In my experience, I've applied and written for a number of different agencies. Sometimes it's really specific and they're clear about what they want you to say and the order that you want to say it. Some agencies actually say in this section, answer these components. And then in other places, it's just more general, like in this section, this is your goal. But it's going to be really clear what they want. So what I always recommend is do it in the order that they're asking for. So it's easy for them to see that you understood their instructions and sort of check it off as you write them.
If I might add to that, one of the things that I would suggest when the solicitations come out, after reading through all of it, there always is an application checklist, which is included at the end of the solicitation that allows applicants to go back and just make sure that they've got all the pieces in place that they need and that they've addressed all the questions. The other tip that I would provide is that within the solicitations, and these certainly with the OVC solicitations and others from the Department of Justice, they're always, in addition to a list of the elements that need to be addressed, there's also a section that identifies the review criteria so that you can see how each of those sections is being weighted as part of the application review process. I think this information, again, is really helpful for applicants to, again, assess where do they really need to spend their time in terms of developing that application and then including that once they're ready to submit.
Thank you, Susan. Also, while we have you on, there's another question that relates to grants, and that is, where do you go to search for solicitations for grants?
Well, there are many places to search. If we're talking very specifically about OVC, and we're talking about or other Department of Justice grants, you can go pretty much straight to the source. The department puts out a financial or a grant funding plan every year that essentially lists all the solicitations that they anticipate that they're going to release. So you can get sort of a sneak peek even before the solicitations are out. The other, if you're thinking about like kind of the wider spectrum of grants, I would suggest one of the best sources for very comprehensive federal grant-wide information about funding opportunities is through grants.gov. Grants.gov is managed by the Department of Health and Human Services, and it serves as the federal portal for the listing of federal funding opportunities across the government. So if you're trying to do just kind of a general broad scan to identify where funding opportunities may be, that is a really good source. The other thing I would suggest is going directly to OVC's website. There's an opportunity that you can sign up and get news about funding opportunities, and you can be one of the first to hear when any particular solicitations are posted.
Well, thank you. This next question, Sarah, I think you'll be best positioned to start answering that. This question is about partnerships. It says, if we partnered with another entity or organization for a service that we don't provide, do we have to contract with that entity in order to receive the grant? Or can we have them under our own umbrella?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean by under your own umbrella, but let me answer, and feel free to chat again if I didn't if I didn't do it clearly. Partnerships are really important, and they can happen in two ways. One of the most common ways, if they want funding, is to do it through a sub award or a sub grant. So for example, let's say you do sex trafficking services and they do labor trafficking, and you're providing comprehensive services, and you're going to give them X% to do that, or something specific like they're going to be your mental health care provider. All of those things are good subcontracts. But then you also have organizations that don't need the funding for the grant. And so then an MOU, or at minimum a letter of support, but I think an MOU would be better, where they state that they're going to do this, that they support your effort in the grant, and that this is part of your plan. So then in the grant narrative, you would write, you know, we don't provide mental health service, but should anyone need it, we're going to contract, or they're going to come into our housing shelter 3 times a week, whatever that looks like. So it really just depends on if money is exchanging hands.
Yeah, I was gonna bounce off of what she said. Just from our experience, that's exactly what we tried to do. And I want to say that that stuff needs to be done way before. We worked on our MOUs and our partnerships with everybody in the community because we knew, and I think OVC also was looking for partnerships. You're not just looking to, we're the only ones that do this, but to be able to fit in your community and be working, especially if we're talking about something like sex trafficking. One person can't do it all, one organization cannot do it all. So we looked for kind of the basic things that we would need that Salvation Army could not provide, like legal aid, outside evaluators. Was the other one? We have interpretation services and counselors. So we knew we wanted that to be paid for. That had to be in place. For me, that was non-negotiable. But then I also have about 8 to 10 other MOUs with different people, different organizations, like Sarah was talking about. So there's no money changing hands, but there's, we do this, you do that. So I do training for anybody that I partner with, because I want the people that I partner with to really know what they're talking about when it comes to human trafficking. So in return, we get to use their services, and we have this kind of ongoing, really nice relationship that we call upon each other when the need arises.
So the next question has to do with outside consultants. And the question is, how do the panelists feel about using outside consultants to help with their grant writing application?
I'll start. So a lot of, I think, and I mentioned this a little bit in our original questions, having a grant writer, which as a consultant grant writer can be really helpful and can help with the lift. But one of the things that organizations need to remember is that so much of this, you're basically developing a program under fire. Hopefully you already know what it is, and it's a tiny new piece. But if you don't include, yourself as a decision maker or subject matter expert, then you lose control. So as someone who writes a grant, you're looking through all these requirements like we talked about already, and you're like, oh, they need an advisory committee, and you write it in. And if they forget to tell you you need an advisory committee, then you're surprised when you get the award or you're not successful. So if you want to hire a consultant, you should feel free to do it, but just make sure you stay involved in the process and that person's part of a larger team and not just the writer. And then the second thing I would add is that I've worked with many consultants who do this work, and some of them are really focused on their area of interest. And so if you can find someone who writes grants for sex trafficking or whatever field that you're in, that's always better, because they understand the language and the nuance of it and can help add some of that depth to a grant. If you hire somebody who doesn't, then I think your grant could fall flat in some areas.
Okay, so thank you very much. This next question relates to data or outcomes. Can you, somebody on the panel, I'm going to push it out to everybody, can you give examples or speak to what kind of data or results are reported and how often are they reported?
I'm not sure I totally get the question, what they're asking
This
for.
is related to data, data. It's basically what kind of, so I'm going to sort of take a stab at this. My assumption is that they're basically talking about outcome measures and all of the data that you need to report to the grant system. So I'm not quite sure myself, but this is what I think that they're asking for. And I'm thinking they're probably talking about progress reports and performance measures.
So for OVC, or the ones I have, it's semi-annual, although you usually put some quarterly reports as well. Some of the grants I've managed, it was really heavy quarterly reporting, which would be a full narrative and data, and others, the heavy lifting with the narrative land every 6 months with just some data. I also find that I want to provide more data than what they ask for. And so I often write a deliverable for sort of a pop-out report to give them some context around it, because there are some limitations on text size and things like that.
I just add that in terms of the grant reporting requirements, there are pretty extensive performance measures and data required to respond to those performance measure requirements. There's information once solicitation comes out that will provide links to the types of data that has to be developed so that applicants can really get a sense of what type of information they're going to have to collect on and ultimately report on as part of their grant administration of their grant.
That's actually a really a point that I had forgotten about, but yeah, you can always see what they're going to ask for. There are 1,000 links in that grant document, and you should probably click on every single one of them. Related to data, I once managed a grant where there was an evaluation component, and in the text it said, where an outside evaluation component where it said here, it said, oh, click here to learn more. And do you agree to this? And when you clicked in, it was extensive, what it was going to be. And you would have really wanted to write in a position to help collect that data. It was beyond the normal standards of what you do for a semi-annual for that particular project. And so clicking on every single link helps avoid, unknown things popping up at the very end of the grant or after you have the award.
And one other thing that I would add is that even right now, there are reports that are issued that are billed from data that's been collected by human trafficking grantees that are current or in the past. There's a lot of information that's available that comes out of that's reported out of that data. Certainly, I'm sure we can provide some links to that data even to this group in the follow-up Q&A.
Okay, then on that note, again, somebody is asking about training. So we've already determined that the grant solicitations are very lengthy and it contains a lot of elements, and it's sometimes like difficult to navigate. So she's asking, how does anybody know where she could find some trainings on grant writing?
Well, I think there might be a difference between just general grant writing and getting training that's specific to a certain program or a certain set of application or solicitations that are available. One thing through, again, the Department of Justice and the Office of Justice Programs, there's actually a number of trainings that will help applicants just in terms of having a better understanding of the application development and application submission process. So again, we can provide links to that, and that certainly is in place. But for broader grant writing training, and I don't know that if it's quite in place yet, but I know that that's perhaps one of the areas that this human trafficking capacity building center will be able to help potential grantees with.
Abby, did you want to chime in there?
Absolutely. I would love to offer up the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center as a resource on both sort of grants and program funding and sustainability. We've helped a number of organizations think about this from a strategic perspective, and we'd be happy to work with you on that as well. So please feel free to reach out to us directly via email. It's contact@ovc-htcbc.org. And I'll also include that email address in the chat as well. We've also gotten several questions in the chat about training for the match requirement, or whether that's something that can be waived or handled differently for a brand new organization. The center has tons of resources on the match requirement. And again, that's something that we'd be happy to share with you and walk you through in a coaching session.
I just want to jump on, oh, Abby's face went away, but I want to jump on there as a recipient of her help, just to give her kudos and the center kudos, because honestly, again, I'm very new. They're all experts on these grant writing things, and I am not. And she really helped us, and her team really helped us to be strategic about just how to do it and how to think about it. So I would highly recommend contacting them about this.
And I would also add that this is an area where I do also think consultants can help. If you were hiring a grant writer and really immersed in the process, that you could sort of learn alongside, so that you wouldn't have to do it, forever, that eventually you could take over that on your own.
So we have a very interesting question here. Maybe Sarah can field this. What is a reasonable percentage of time for a project director on an OVC budget?
Depends on what the project director is going to do. In some organizations, the project director is especially if you're a small organization, you also might be a performer. And so I'm not going to answer that question. In fact, Susan might be able to better answer what they typically see. But I think you could, fund most of the position if that's 100% of what they're doing. If they're also potentially backup services, if they're on, it can vary. I can continue to ramble about this one for a little bit. So,
well, I was just going to say, Sarah, that I think also one of the things to look towards in some programs, there's actually a requirement with regard to the level of or the time commitment that a project director or project manager may have to engage in the project. That's not necessarily the case across the board, but there might be some guidance just that way that would indicate what level of commitment a project manager or project director would have to have. Beyond that, I would just certainly recommend that it should be directly sort of gauged by, what are the activities that are being proposed as part of the project? How many staff are there? What types of, is it primarily service delivery? Is there some service delivery, training, other things? So again, kind of thinking about shy of an actual requirement in a program, just considering what would be the necessary level of involvement to effectively implement a project as it's conceptualized by your organization.
Thank you so much, Susan, everybody. So I have another question that is sort of like not included in the Q&A, but I wanted to ask it because we talked extensively about applying for and submitting a federal grant. So Susan, I was wondering do you know whether there are any new steps in the application process this year? Susan, you are unmuted. Could you please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would say that, again, for those of you who've applied in the past, you know that there are multiple steps in the application process. This year, the Department of Justice actually switched to a new grants processing and management system. It's known as Just Grants. It's this new system that's designed to help allow applicants and grantees to really move through the entire grants management life cycle from solicitation development through closeout. So my understanding is that the steps to apply this year might be a little bit different than they have in the past because of this new system. The requirements still will involve an initial application through grants.gov. It will still require having certain things in place, including having a DUNS number and having a SAM registration. I can go into more detail about what those are, but so those steps aren't any different, but there may be some new steps. And that as far as I know, there's actually some really good training on the OJP website through Just Grants that talks about the new system, including one that's very specific to the application process. So I would highly encourage those who think they might want to apply to go ahead and take a look at that, those video clips and that other helpful information.
Well, thank you. I know we've already talked about the financial component, but this is another question about finances. And it is, when completing budget allocations, is there concerns or red flags when an agency includes all upper management within the budget? Anybody can answer that?
Hi, Constance. I'm just wondering, again, sort of it's the clarification of the question. So does it raise a concern or red flag if you've got like many people within the organization that are included in the budget? Is that my understanding of the question correctly?
Well, I do think so. Also, but I really think the way I'm understanding it is that you are writing the budget and you are including all of your upper management into this budget for the grant. Will that raise a red flag?
I think first and foremost, the budget really should be reflective of the actual project that's being implemented. There are certainly times that there could be upper management who aren't directly like part of the implementation of the project, but they still might have some oversight of the project, some supervision of the project. So there's certainly a degree to which there can be a number of different individuals across the organization within the budget. I think a question comes down to what percentage of their time, and it has to be very kind of reasonable and realistic to, again, what their actual contributions to that project are.
One thing that I always talk to people about who are writing grants are connecting your budget to your goals and objectives, particularly. So theoretically, if you know every objective, you should be like, how am I going to accomplish that? Well, Abby's going to do this, and Lauren's going to do this, and Susan's going to do this. And you're writing about that in the narrative. I need an advocate. And so then your budget, it shows up as an advocate. Or I need clinical supervision to address the vicarious trauma. Well, that's going to be this person over here. So especially some of those high level partnerships, you know, that need to be created. Maybe your higher level folks run your collaborative or task force. And so that time, you know, but if you're connecting it to those goals and objectives, it's always going to end up feeling reasonable. And remember, there's indirect too, to help, you know, cover some of the other, like I've noticed some of the questions in the chat, you know, most grants have an indirect component that you've either negotiated or you use the standard 10%, which helps cover costs that can't be easily divided.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. We are running out of time and I have to wrap up. So I want to thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts today. This has been a very informative conversation, and I hope it continues to spark everybody's ideas and how to find and apply for future federal grants.
Thank you, Constance, for moderating today's session, and thank you to Susan, Sarah, and Lauren for sharing your expertise and perspectives. As I mentioned in the chat, we'll be following up with each of you through email to attach relevant resources, including some of the links we shared today, an FAQ document with the questions and answers, and information on the next Ask an Expert session. If you have any outstanding questions that weren't addressed today, please feel free to include them in the Q&A box, as we will answer them in our follow-up resources. Before we close, please take a moment to respond to our closing poll. The link to sign up for OVC News is in the chat. We encourage you to subscribe so you'll receive notices when the FY 2021 solicitations come out. We hope that you have found today's session informative, and we look forward to having you join us for a future Ask an Expert webinar. Goodbye, and thank you everyone for joining us.